Well, good morning. Welcome back. I think it was an excellent day today, yesterday. It will be equally good today. And we will start at a high level with Jonas Astrup. Jonas, I guess it's in English, isn't it? And Jonas is head of development and innovation at something called Meyers Madhus. And it's not Meyers Madhouse. It's a food house or food store. You can explain it more precisely. But Klaus Meyer, who has given the name to this food house, Klaus Meyer is, I should say, an institution in Denmark. He's one of our most influential food entrepreneurs. He has been busy for 30 years, 40 years, something like that. Meyer's Food House is dedicated to culinary dissemination and teaching. They are consulting programs for the private and public sector. My grandchildren actually visited Meyers Madhus, and they learned how to make pizzas. So it's a great place. Jonas has co-written a number of cookbooks. I don't know if your name appears on the front page. It does, yeah, okay. On the back, and Klaus Meyer on the front, exactly. You have developed several retail products, etc. But you have a background in food science and technology from Copenhagen University. You have actually worked at the at that time acclaimed Nordic Food Lab. You are still a regular guest lecturer at the Integrated Nordic Food Lab at Copenhagen University. So you have both an academic background, but is a practical person today. So the floor is yours. I'm looking forward to listening to your experiences for the next 30 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lars. Thank you so much for the introduction. High level. Oof. Let me do my best. Believe me, I'm extremely thrilled to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation, Karen also. I'm very pleased to see so many unfamiliar faces as well as familiar faces whose work I truly admire: Ole, Michael, Helle, and Karen. And also hello to all the people in the other end of this digital signal watching today. Time, at least to us humans on Earth, seems to be a scarce source. So I'm going to try to use my approximately 30 minutes wisely and perhaps begin a bit unorthodox before I sort of full speed ahead. I promise you, delve into a few examples on the work that we do and do our best to carry out on an everyday basis. We begin as guests, says Priya Basil in her book, Reflections on Food, Community, and the Meaning of Generosity, and continues, every single one of us, helpless little creatures whose every need must be attended to, creatures who for a long time can give nothing or very little back, yet who in the usual run of things, nevertheless insinuate ourselves deep into the lives of our careers and take up permanent residence in our hearts. The power of unconditional hospitality, either metaphorically or practically, has always been the premise of Meyers. But up until late 2019, however, more than 30 years after Klaus Meyer founded the company, which I like to think of as a movement, whom, by the way, was also one of the founding figures of the New Nordic Kitchen Manifesto in 2004, and one of the guys behind a noticeable Copenhagen restaurant called Noma, just name a very few. The idea of unconditional hospitality had never been formulated in our company. And without revealing any sort of, we could say, state secrets, I guess, the idea of unconditional hospitality now serves as a true guiding star. You could call it a Sirius star. Whenever we are to unfold the purpose of our company going forward, and perhaps occasionally also our personal purpose. Before I give you a few examples of our work, and by the way, this is one of my 2 slides. Before I give you a few examples of our work with, by the way, the ambition, either directly or indirectly, to touch upon the scope and concerns of this conference, let me start by giving you, surprise, surprise, other examples. The reason for this is that Myers is a multifaceted food business. Hopefully soon a B Corp certified one. We operate canteens, approximately 90 of them, serving or cooking and serving approximately 500,000 meals a month. We develop and sell products in the Danish retail industry. That would be jams, breads, flour, and other types of convenience products. We do catering and deliver foods for everything from for events as it could be a baptism or even a funeral and everything in between, you could say. We bake breads every day in our bakeries in town, cinnamon swirls, and a pastry called Tibirkes. I know that is Michael Bum's favorite. And we run several restaurants, primarily in Copenhagen area, and also a small vinegar brewery. So different stuff. And then there's Myers Madhus, an institution within Myers, a bit more than 20 years old, located approximately 4.5 kilometers from here on the Nørrebrogade. Devoted from day one to use food as a mean to provide most people possible, especially children, useful and meaningful tools for them to be able to navigate those moments in life that implies food one way or another, and therefore also in at many occasions hospitality. Myers Madhus, I'm going to say Madhus, not Madhouse. Madhus offers an array of cooking classes for just ordinary people, more than 20 different ones actually. So everything from sourdough baking, fermentation, the craft of making sausages, desserts, and obviously also vegetarian foods. And actually, as we speak right now, we elaborate and teach a group of our head chefs from our own canteens about the learnings and the data-driven tools that we've created with life cycle assessment experts in our sustainability strategy. And of course, also some culinary possibilities within that strategy. We work, you could say, as some sort of like a special advisor to our own company and colleagues in Myers. We also offer various concepts of culinary team buildings, which funnily, I think, sometimes turns the classic structural hierarchy of an organization upside down. Imagine the CEO being bad at cooking. That's usually quite fun. And approximately about 40,000 guests comes to cook with us in the third backyard of Nørrebrogade in these formats every year. We write cookbooks, and actually we just released a staggering 586-page big book last week. Everything you need in order to be successful during Christmas time, at least here in Denmark. We take part of research programs, develop the culinary content in order to research on topics such as kidney malfunctions, fat liver issues, a new Nordic diet health benefits, etc. we make what we like to call, or at least I like to call it, some sort of brand activism, or just activism. Pop-up activities on the northern part of Zealand during the summertime, serving more than 20,000 roast pork sandwiches at Roskilde Festival each year, or at least when Roskilde Festival is there, just to name a few. And then, as Lars also said, we do consultancy both for the private and public sector. That could be setting up an organic bakery at the nearby local hospital, Bispebjerg, not far from here, with customized baking goods for those people who are hospitalized for one reason or another. We do resourcing programs for inmates or imprisoned people in Vridsløselille, or we did, in a state prison here in just outside Copenhagen. And we do, and then our single biggest consultancy job would be, and Karen, you're very familiar with this, would be to transform and help the about 1,100 public kitchens within the public institution in the municipality of Copenhagen. So in the municipality of Copenhagen, the politicians laid out a new food and meal strategy in 2019. 4 years before that, we've worked to transform their grocery shopping into organic produce without having extra finances to do so. A team of gastronomic consultants from Marius Madhus now assist the personnel in all those kitchens in every aspect of cooking and eating situations that varies in schools, daycare institutions, nursing homes, social services, housings, cultural and sport centers. So you imagine the very different kind of meal situation you could work with in such a program. Basically, the idea is to unite deliciousness, health, and sustainability through collaboration between citizens, companies, and organizations. That is a very interesting program. Additionally, we offer cooking classes for all public schools and daycare institutions in the municipality of Copenhagen too. It's a program called Mod på Mad, and a bad translation would be something like courage for food or courage on food. In total, 2 classes every single day pays us a visit in Marius Madhus, as well as we do teaching on site on school, so 13 lectures a week. And in total, we meet and cook with more than 12,000 kids each and every year in that program. So that's a lot of cooking and a lot of young, bright people. And then my probably last example for now is a great program I think is called Højskole uden mure. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Danish concept of a højskole, I would very much encourage you to do a bit of research on it. It's kind of going to school without really going to school, but being in a democratic institutions where you're not supposed to go to exams, but delve into topics that could be everything from literature to music, sport, and so on. But we've created a program called Højskole uden mure, a school without walls. It's for young people who are in various kinds of distress outside the traditional educational system, usually unemployed, carrying big burdens in their relatively short life. When these types of programs seem to succeed, it's usually due to the combination of a skilled and a strong chef profile, one who is able to motivate the people and who is not part of the so-called system, and a good social worker with strong relational capabilities. This means, and this is perhaps not a big surprise to so many bright scientists and researchers such as you, but But by building real competences, we improve these people's and young people's self-esteem. Everyone is able to contribute in a kitchen, cooking, and hence we build some sort of community. And the third thing is that this process is very clear and distinct. The transformative power of a raw ingredient that turns into a meal happens right in front of them, with them. And that is perhaps the essence of some of the disseminational work that we try to carry out in Meyers Madhus. I would have shown you a picture, but I was actually a bit unsure about the GDPR rules. But we have especially one guy who made a big impression, or a young guy that made a big impression when I was in Meyers Madhus. He suffered from very tough anxiety and has been sitting in his own room for a couple of years, and being part of this program has enabled him to begin at the Hotel and Restaurant School as a chef here in Copenhagen. And if we can succeed with those type of things, I believe we've done everything we could in Meyers. So sort of on that note, let's build a longer table, not a higher wall, everyone. And that the idea of a longer table has actually also turned into a part of our new and revisited purpose for Meyers. And I'm extremely happy about that. Yes, thank you.
So we'll start with the question. I'm going to grab this microphone. Oh, yes, there we go. Okay. Question. Does anyone have a question, comment, engagement? I'm going to swivel around. While you're thinking about it, I have a question. It's a kind of strategic question. All these wonderful projects, how much institutional support? What are the pathways that have allowed you to do these wonderful things?
Well, you're absolutely right. Those are, most of them are funding projects. But to do a proper funding, you probably know a hell of a lot more about funding than I do. But sometimes it's good if you team up with the right partners, and you bring something original to the table, and you're able to show that you in your past has succeeded with something similar. Yeah, that's usually how we come around those type of projects. So and we have various partners. Those could be the school for future chefs and people who want to work in the hospitality business. It could be programs for encouraging young people to do more sport activities in certain areas of Copenhagen and so on. So various partners.
Good morning. Thank you. That was really inspiring, in various ways. I actually had a question. You were involved in so many activities, and in the last example where you mentioned the vulnerable youth and the project which you're doing with them to try to develop their competencies, self-esteem, etc. You said that, the people you use, let's put it this way, would be a skilled chef and also somebody with this social work, social relationships competency. For all your other projects, what would be the qualifications of the people you employ? In the sense, you have your consultancy, you have your cooking classes, you have your education at your special place. So who are your employees?
We're quite dynamic, I would say, but Maja's Madhus consists now of, I believe, 42 full-time employees, and then we have approximately the same number of we call them værter. You can say hosts, people who are young people. Yes, I'm going to come to that. Yeah, and most of them, I was one myself 12 years ago while I was studying with Michael at KU, and most of them has some sort of background within health studies or other type related to foods, other research programs related to foods. But actually, our director comes with a background from studying multimedia studies and so on. And that is actually, I think, one of the strengths of Maja's Madhus, that we bring in very different backgrounds. Some comes with, of course, are skilled and trained chefs, but it's not all chefs who are able to stand in front of a group of people, let's say 20 people, and teach them. That's quite rare, I would say. Then myself, as studied food science, and we have people who studied other, what could you say? What would be the word? Yeah, I can't. To be honest, I can't think of, and I can't come up with every the backgrounds of all the 42 people. But let me say, put it this way: it's a broad number of studies. And then to answer your question directly, I mean, it's not totally necessary for a chef to come into Maja's Madhus and do teaching, that they actually train chefs. It makes sense in a lot of areas, because as a trained chef, you would bring in, hopefully, I would say, some basic cooking skills. But when you're dealing with people on an everyday basis, everything from cooking classes to team buildings, culinary team buildings, you need to be just as good with people as you are with cooking itself. So that's what we're looking for. And of course, we do our best to train them.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering about your connection with the producer or the farmer.
Oh.
So we have food that's being grown.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you integrate or engage them in the process of preparing and distributing the food?
Wonderful question. So actually, the guy who was on the photo is a farmer from Bornholm who we teamed up with in order to produce Danish legumes. But let me give you another example. Around 15 years ago, you were, at least here in Denmark, most often told that you could not grow wheat for making proper bread here. And I think Klaus and a few other people, amongst one of them is an organic farmer called Per Grobe, got a bit, you could say, furious with that idea. And so a Swedish guy called Henrik Larsen just found some Ölands wheat seeds in the Nordic Dean Bank, and we started to plant them out. The yield was not as high as you would normally expect for wheat grown here, at least, but the baking qualities and the taste, the flavor that it brought to the table was outstanding. So we came up with a few recipes for that wheat in specific. And it has probably been the wheat it's been our go-to bread for the last 15 years here. And then we suddenly opened up a small bakery, which is still around in Jægersborg, also in Nørrebro. We did a cookbook, a baking book. We started selling flour in Danish retail section, Danish retail industry, and we started doing baking classes. And baking classes is by second to none our most popular cooking class in Maja's Madhus. It's sold out almost all the time. That sparkles something in the Danish food culture. you could say. And now, I mean, there's so many so skilled and wonderful bakeries in town. It's absolutely phenomenal, I think. So, and that was only by the idea of teaming up with a guy who knew exactly what he did on the farmland. And we continue to do that, not with Per, but with another guy called Anders Borg.
Jonas says, thank you so much for coming here and introduce us to Myers. I have two questions,
Yes.
one personal and one professional.
Okay.
So this unconditional hospitality is Myers' brand, isn't it?
No, it's you could say it's sort of been the premise of of the activities that we've done in the past, but we've never actually been able to sort of formulate exactly what we would like to, or what is the purpose with our organization and the work that we carry out in our daily life. And then we came, it was actually an article in The Guardian a few years back by this woman that I quoted earlier on. And I urge you to read it. I could forward you the link. And it was so beautifully written how unconditional hospitality, not only in the food industry, but as a metaphor for almost everything else in our lives, could be a meaningful or something meaningful to pursue.
And now the personal question and then the professional. You came from Copenhagen, what was it, food science and technology,
yeah.
And now you're head of development and innovation at Myers. What is your educational background, and is this kind of professional career shift for you? What is your driver in your working life today compared with your working life at the university? The professional and
that's a very good question.
Your educational background too, would we like to hear a little bit about?
As a former colleague to especially Michael at the Nordic Food Lab, which was also at one point a part of the University of Copenhagen. Let me start another somewhere else. I came to the university, and honestly, some of the first sort of messages that we got me, I wouldn't say excited, but actually came to a surprise to me, because at that time point, at least in the books that we read, quality was appeared not to have nothing to do with the sensory qualities of the meal that you're about to eat and to eat with other people, but was a matter of reproducibility and food safety. It's not to neglect those parameters, but luckily I ran into Michael and his classes and other, of course, and I found out that there was actually a room at the university to delve into studies that had to do with the sensory qualities of what you're about to eat, and also the food system that those foods and raw ingredients relied on. So that sparkled my interests, and the program allowed me to select those classes and lectures. And I did so, and I think that have probably shaped at least some of my you could say mental capacity and what I found interesting in my now professional daily life. One thing that gives me extreme pleasure in my working life. It was published yesterday that a young female chef from a restaurant in La Paz in Bolivia had been awarded the 50 best, I think still, and you could laugh about it, but still called the best female chef in that part of America. 10 years ago, Klaus went to Bolivia with Oxfam Ibis to set up a restaurant and few other food-related activities in order for in order to give young underprivileged people from the streets something else to do in life. And he had teamed up with a Danish woman called Camilla Seidler, and she was actually awarded this exact same prize some years ago. They went there with some of the same ideas that the New Nordic Kitchen was founded on, and suddenly you're in Bolivia with 3 or 4 different climate zones, totally undiscovered, raw ingredients, and you imagine the difficulties of cooking food in an altitude of more than, I think it's 3,000 meters. Things doesn't boil the way it usually do here. But yesterday, a young Bolivian woman was awarded this prize, and that made my day totally. I don't know her. I've no idea. I've never talked to her. I know she's been in Copenhagen a few times, but she got this prize. And was, I think, one of the best days in my professional career this year. So that inspires me to carry on the work that we do every day, also with people who are in distress in our own country.
You really make a difference. Yes. The other question, you mentioned your food consulting activities, and I have had the honor, I would name it, to be engaged to qualify your food. Your food, what could we call them? Gastronomiske rådgivere, gastronomical
Consultants, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, advisors.
Advisors.
Okay, for the almost 1,100 institutions here in this municipality of Copenhagen. Could you say a little bit? You say if you are a counselor or an advisor, it's necessary to know something about cooking or baking or what is in your hands, like. But you said that it is as most important to know something about to get relations or to get an understanding of what they know, feel, have opinion about, where they are in their lives and so on. So my question is about teaching competences. Could you say a little bit more about that? What do you do, or what do Myers do to qualify the counselors' teaching competences?
Well, we team up with capacities as you kind of sometimes, and excuse me if I did, I might mix things up a bit, because the program where you need a good social worker with relational skills and capabilities and a good chef was in this program, Højskolen Mur in specific. However, you still need to rely on some of the same qualities in this specific program in the municipality of Copenhagen. And there's a big difference whether you're supposed to make food with a personnel in a kitchen cooking for kids or for young people, or even for kids with special needs, or for elders with special needs. The team that does that has been around in Myers Madhus, has been part of the previous program also. So they've gained up approximately seven years of experience and do so. And it's in a strong collaboration with the municipality itself. And we hire in people also who can make us better in some of the aspects that has to do with teaching and project leading this type of program. And then it's about building up relationships, I wouldn't say, but relations to the people who are actually cooking. We also invite them into Myers Madhus for classes there. So it's not always at the institution itself. But so I hope I answered your question, Karen, but we team up with professional people who are experts on their field. Also, we have a, what's it called? Dietist. Just a dietist. That was part of the requirement also for the program this time. So we've actually hired, it's the first time we've ever hired a dietist in Myers Madhouse, which may seem a bit sort of strange or weird, taking into consideration that we've been part of research programs where sort of health issues has been a cornerstone of our work. But we firmly believe that you're able to combine deliciousness, health, and now also sustainability in a meal. Yeah.
Thank you, Jonas. Always nice to hear this wonderful story about Klaus and his dynasty. I still remember a day in '88 when I met a very young guy, and I was still quite young myself. And ever since, Klaus and I have made projects together. Yes. So this fairy tale, actually, that you're unfolding for us. Yesterday, Karen told us to remember to use the critical eye. So if you should bring that on, not being negative, but just trying to look at yourself with a mirror, how do you, in which way do you try to take care of that you don't grow too big, that you don't get too many engagements, that how, because I know working with the municipality of Copenhagen is like a monster to work with. And even you have all the best ideas, they might destroy you, and then you just start walking in their path instead of the opposite. So just, you told hiring a dietist to help you could be risky, because then you're not allowed to serve salmon because it will be too fatty. And then I've been into that discussion with the municipality before. So do you have somebody to be the watcher of not getting too big, like the municipality and like a lot of other institutions, that ends up in this enormous bureaucracy, or forgetting the star you're aiming at? You understand my question?
I think I do. I'm going to try to answer in the best possible way. It's totally fair you call it a fairy tale. In my opinion, you're allowed to call it whatever you want, Helle. What matters to me is that we make a difference for people, not only the people that we work to help in certain situations, or the people that we sell a product, which is, I mean, just a commercial business, basically. But one way to come around with an answer, or to give you an answer, I mean, Myers is partly, or is predominantly owned by Eco-Invest, so a big capital fund, and that obviously challenge some of the ideas that the company was founded on years back. Part of our business makes most of the money, our canteens, obviously, and that allows us to do and to take initiatives a bit less focused on profit, luckily. And we're actually also able to, we talk about it once in a while, that we strive to find the right spot between being ideal and commercial. So obviously we make some sort of profit also in Myers Madhouse. And one of the ways that you're able to keep the sort of the monster down, or the size down, especially Myers Madhouse, is the physical frames. So we have 4 kitchens, and that's it. I mean, and our capacity is almost 100% at the moment. So that might be a part of part of my answer towards your question, but I'm not sure that you're fully satisfied if I know you well. You're so bright, so if possible, please repeat what I haven't answered. As I said earlier, I like to think of the company as some sort of movement, not as a monster. And I know Klaus once formulated it this way, that he also liked to think of himself and his ideas and the ideas of the activities of Myers as a sort of like a, especially in these times, it's a bit difficult to say, but sort of like we need to work virus-based, you know. So to find the meaningful relations and find the spots where in our food culture, in our common food culture, that could be improved significantly, as we did, I would say, in large terms with bread 15 years ago. And as we're trying to do now with the kitchens in the municipality of Copenhagen also. So small pockets of misery, you could say. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question more concerned on the general reception of the food industry and hospitality here in Copenhagen or in Denmark.
Oh yeah.
I come from Austria, and we are very much a tourism-based economy as well. But we have continuous problems that the hospitality industry is just not accepted as a career, or not a desirable career, to the point where it's mostly operated by foreign workers. And now, of course, we also have some food trends. We have trendy new restaurants, maybe not as much as in Copenhagen. But I see that this is just, there are some chefs that stand out, but the kitchens are still staffed by overworked and underpaid personnel, or at least that's the impression that the majority of people have. So I wonder how the whole Nordic kitchen, your work, your inspiring work, and all this, whether this has also had an influence on the society, on the acceptance of a career in hospitality and the food industry.
I wish I could say just blank yes. Not many weeks ago, two of our two restaurants here in Copenhagen were voted first and second on 50 best list this year, which is, I think is, I mean, probably won't ever happen again in our lifetime, and was unthinkable 10, 15 years ago here. Noma got its 3rd star. The culinary focus upon Copenhagen from the rest of the world, at least in those type of circles, is immense. But as far as I know, the what do you call it? Not uptake, but the number of young people who wants to become a chef, where we teach them here in Copenhagen, is dramatically low, dramatically low. I think the same goes with also people who want to serve otherwhere in the hospitality business. That's, I mean, I can't stress that that problem enough, because who are to serve, who are to cook, who are to develop, who are to innovate our industry going forward. That's, I mean, that is a hell of a task that needs to be solved. And how you do that? Whoa, good question. Role models, bright role models from the restaurants might not be enough. And I think part of that problem is also rooted in the way that we've traditionally trained young people to become a chef. If you go to the place in Copenhagen where you train chefs, you would find out that the group of people, you could say, come with very different social backgrounds, ages, and so on, much more than you would find it probably at a university or any other type of academic institution. And that obviously brings and provides challenges for the school itself. You should be able to cope with that. But of course, that's so difficult. Probably Haley, you know quite a lot about this, but it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem, and with the coronavirus, a lot of the people who used to serve here returned to their to the country where they probably came from, and now we are in a huge lack of professional people. And the same goes with our own business. And I can tell you, in September alone, because Corona is, well, hopefully here, part of our past now, we had 200 people in September alone. 200 people, and there's no more people out there. I mean, and I know the paychecks now has gone up like you wouldn't believe it for certain jobs that were usually not a highly paid job. So we need more people to painters to this, or to think that this could be a future for them.
I have a question from the online audience.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, we're all going on a journey together here. But they're interested in knowing more about your inmates project,
Okay.
your work in prisons, and particularly, were they eating together? Were they cooking together? What was the dynamics of that project?
So it's a program that unfortunately doesn't. We had a shift some years back, and a new government came to power, and that government in particular had a different view on how to treat people who had done something wrong in their early life. But the idea was that we could use culinary training programs for people who have done various types of crimes, give them a good culinary good program. We set up in the end of each program, actually, we set up a restaurant, so people who, and their families too, were able to come into the prison and have a meal served by the prisoners themselves. And it gave them, just as I said earlier on, it gave them, it had a self-esteem building moment to it. And some of them actually, when they were released from prison, found a career within the food industry afterwards. So it was actually one of the first projects within sort of this re-socializing, trying to use food as a mean to help and guide people who are outside, you could say, a normal path in life for most of us. I taught them coffee myself, and I've never felt that. I mean, never felt so claustrophobic when I entered a prison, and you know, knife. I mean, we had knives in the kitchen. Obviously, they were hanging on the wall and they were marked, so it was quite easy to see if they were lacking a knife somewhere. But everything went pretty well.
Thank you for obviously the amount of work that you do. When you mentioned unconditional hospitality, the link that came to my mind is community well-being, or the word through food and food making. And I just want to draw a bit of the analogy to a movement in the fine arts, which was relational aesthetics, which shifted the emphasis from the product at the end of the experience to the process.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know how that applies, how that might apply. Work that you're doing, that really what's most important is getting the people together intergenerationally and so on. Whether they make good food at the end, sometimes doesn't matter as much. The emphasis is making those experiences where people get together. And that's what builds the well-being of the community.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I said that we've used food as a mean, but obviously we don't always just use food as a mean. We also cook food with the purpose of making extremely delicious food. So we spend quite a lot of time discussing internally what deliciousness might be, and how we can make sure that everyone once in a while gets food that are so delicious that they stop up for a moment. And I'm also quite thrilled because we recently published a sustainability strategy for the entire organization of MIAS, which is, I mean, carrying in mind that those activities are very, very different, a difficult task. The way we're gonna try to cope with sustainability issues is by making delicious food, basically. So combining delicious food with data-driven tools that we've produced, alongside a sort of like a broad sustainability perspective. That's how we're gonna work with sustainability going forward. So food should not only be a meat, it could be sometimes, but should also be extremely delicious. Whatever that might be, by the way. Well, thank you so much.
Hi, thank you. Very interesting work. Kind of also building off of Helle, your question, really interesting question. Part of your work seems to be about sort of in-skillment, teaching people to cook for themselves. Even this idea of self-provisioning brings with it a more sustainable view. And
ultimately, yes.
And that kind of this idea of relocalization in food is no longer fringe, is more kind of the mainstream, I guess you would say, in food movements these days, in sustainable food. And I wonder if you can say a bit more about how your kind of system of work and the relations you have with your community also kind of help to further relocalize. And in my sense, I see that as a way of further transcending this globalized food system by coming back to where you're at. And I'm interested in more of that.
Was I the only one who not quite? Maybe would it be possible for you to sort of reframe, or just for me to give you a
maybe just more about your philosophy around relocalization of food, and maybe through your story, I guess you talked a lot about that, but I'm just interested.
The localization of food.
Yes.
Whether or not we use locally produced.
Sure, locally produced, but also the impacts that you have in a way that reverberate in the community.
Okay. I'm going to do my best here. Some of the work that we've done with a person called Yannick Schmidt, who've helped us build a tool for us to calculate exactly how much CO2 that we produce per a meal or deprive for the atmosphere. Also help us understand much better than ever before the impact on CO2 emissions, whether or not the type of food that you're about to eat comes from Danish farmland or from, let's say, southern Spain or Italy. And that has actually been proven to be just a minor factor when it comes to CO2 emissions, at least in our company. 95% of our CO2 emission comes from the food that we buy and cook, or the raw ingredients that we buy, cook, and serve. Only 5% comes from our, used up by electricity or transportation and so on. Only 5%. So if we're to do something or anything significantly within our own lives as a food business, we need to take a very close look on the types of ingredients that we buy. And we did a proper baseline measurement in 2018. And one of the interesting ideas, or some of the very interesting results that came out of that was, I think approximately 5% measured per kilo were red meat. But the red meat accounted for more than 60% of our CO2 emissions. And you all know that. But it became very, very clear to us what exactly that we need to do in order to improve our own CO2 emission measurements. Of course, we need to cut down on red meat, and we need to find new ways, also with respect for the Eat Lancet report and the new official dietary guidelines in Denmark, telling all of us that we should eat 100 grams of legumes, cooked legumes per day. Go ahead. That's quite. It's. I think on average we eat 3-4 grams or so. If you take a look at the statistics from DTU, Danish Technical University. But we took that as a challenge. So 2 years ago we did a book on legumes, focusing on legumes. And the picture you just saw was this guy that we've teamed up with on Bornholm, producing lentils for us. And we have a farm on Slagelse, the western part of Zealand, now producing the by far best pea that I've ever tasted from Denmark. It's called Sirius. And those are some of the culinary tracks that we're now trying to boost and empower within all of our kitchens. And obviously it makes sense for us to build and strengthen our own food culture here by producing varieties of legumes that were usually produced here up until the potato arrived here. Instead of importing lentils from Uzbekistan or chickpeas from Canada, so that's part of our journey toward local foods, as well as building recipes and ways to actually cook and eat those types of raw ingredients. So that was perhaps an answer to just a minor part of your question, but I'm happily engage in trying to answer the rest, if I understand your question correct. Okay, Ole, yes.
Unconditional, that's a very strong word.
Oh, yes.
But I like sort of the statement unconditional hospitality.
Yeah.
So my question is, in many cases, people don't know what is best for them, whether it comes to health or nutrition, and certainly when it comes to the sort of sustainability discussion and climate.
Yeah.
And you're also quite engaged in teaching and education. How do you align the unconditional hospitality with actually making people to do something that maybe they don't want, or don't realize that this is good for them? And I hate to say words like nudging, because then Karen will jump on me, or
you're going to take that the discussion.
Educating, or sort of trying to align people's maybe less well formulated attentions with how to deal with their lives. And then sort of these big issues that you really want to address with respecting nature, making a green transition, or whatever. Is it really unconditional?
I'm going to bring that back with me, Ole, as I would have assumed a very difficult answer that you would, or question that you would propose. I'm going to try to say at least one thing. Deliciousness is part of the equation, no doubt about that, and that obviously takes years of training, years of practicing, trials and errors within the kitchen. And I saw the other day that a guy from a Danish organization called Tink, trying to work on behalf of the Danish consumer, had lined up 10 different products And it seemed like no one in Denmark were able to rank those products in order their CO2 emissions. So obviously we have a huge challenge in front of us. As far as I know, democracy is the best known tool, at least in most parts of the world. I would argue in every part of the world, but sometimes you feel a strong urge just to dictate things. But I think whenever you tyrannize or dictate things, at some point you would receive some sort of suppression. And I don't think that's not a sustainable path for the development of the food culture that we share. So what we can do in my eyes is that we can do our absolute best to bring foods to the table that are tasty and do it in a manner that make people feel part of a community and feel part of something larger than the meal itself. And I know you say that plants don't want to be eaten, but they're pretty tasty sometimes.
Can I suggest a solution?
Oh, yes.
Which just dawned on me. Everyone's looking at diet and had what's the calorie count, right? We could have the CO2 count on the menu, and then you could have a kind of democratic what each decision means.
I mean, you could. We just need to find out what are the data that are supposed to deliver that number in specific. I mean, right now you have hundreds of databases that you can draw from, and which one of those databases are the most accurate, you could say. Good question. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But if I were to end with a quote, I would. I was so fortunate that I had the chance to see Johan Rökström, who all of you know, a few years back in Copenhagen, and he said, back then, if we get food right, we get sustainability right. Yeah. Perfect. I'm going to end it there. I wish I'd said it myself. Thank you.